So good morning, everyone. As Cassie mentioned, my name is Bruce Knight. Fairly new to Bytes, but I guess not new to the Microsoft 365 world. Moved over from South Africa not too long ago, but used to work at Microsoft for many years there, and fortunately come over here and cloud security solution specialist here at Bytes. So I look forward to speaking to you in the next half an hour or so, just to kind of talk to you a little bit about the Microsoft security offerings that we have in Microsoft 365, and of course largely why users, hopefully like yourself, are adopting these security offerings moving forward. So I guess these new security offerings that Microsoft have brought out kind of make it a little bit easier now for you to adopt just those security pieces or the compliance pieces that you may want to use, rather than stepping up to that full E5 suite. And so we'll talk a little bit about what some of those new security or some of those security features are, and then towards the end we'll have a look at the licensing piece in a little bit more detail. So kind of what's changed, how you can take on these new subscriptions, and depending on what sort of agreement you have. So we will discuss the licensing piece as well. So really quickly, I guess let's start off with, and I'm sure most of you probably seen a slide that looks like this or something very similar, but let's have a look at this again. Quick overview: what is Microsoft 365? It's that complete intelligence solution that empowers everyone to work together, and of course securely. It includes things like Office 365, Windows 10, and enterprise mobility and security, whether that be the E3 or the E5 flavor of things. And of course, if you look at the bottom of your screen, they deliver on those 4 key areas when you sort of buy into the Microsoft 365 world. So that's unlocking creativity by enabling people to work naturally with ink or any other sort of input devices that they need. Provides the broadest and deepest set of apps and services with a universal toolkit for teamwork. We'll touch a little bit on the teamwork piece and why it's important to, if you're starting to look at adopting some of the teamwork services in Office 365, how you could secure those and make sure you move forward in a secure fashion. So the next pillar is simplifies IT by unifying management across users, devices, apps, and services, and then helps safeguard customer data, company data, and intellectual property with built-in intelligent security. And that's going to be sort of the main focus of this session today around the security pillar. But of course, what are we trying to secure as we move into this Office 365 or Microsoft 365 world? This is a pretty nice slide. It kind of gives you a nice overview of that universal toolkit for collaboration. And I guess this is one of the main reasons why a lot of customers are moving into Office 365, and we typically see customers looking at that top right quadrant there, communicate as a first sort of point of call when they're migrating over to Office 365. So moving mail across, but that doesn't really change the way you do things. So if you're looking to this new culture of work to try and modernize and change the way you do things, just moving email is not really going to give you that. So you need to sort of incorporate the rest of the pillars as well. So looking at things like how do I co-author in real time, how can I share documents easily and securely, using note-taking, content discovery, and the likes. So what I like to sort of talk about here is, if you haven't, and I'm sure most of you know about Microsoft Teams today, and in fact, I think yesterday or the day before, there was a blog post. Microsoft Teams kind of turned 2 years old and they won an award at Enterprise Connect. So I think it's now more than 500,000 organizations using Teams. So really is one of the fastest growing applications in the Microsoft portfolio. The nice thing about Teams is it kind of incorporates the create, communicate, connect, and coordinate pillars all together in a single sort of hub for teamwork. So that brings these all together and allows your users to communicate, co-author, have meetings, do email, and all those kinds of things, but all together through a single sort of app. And of course that's available across the platform, PC, Mac, mobile devices, etc. So, you know, if you haven't started looking at Microsoft Teams, perhaps it's a good time to start having a look at that. But of course, you know, why do we want to get to that sort of world? That's to kind of give everybody, and this is kind of that vision that everybody's looking for. You know, we want to enable employees to be able to work from anywhere on any device and be flexible, be able to connect wherever they are. So this is that utopia, I guess, where most organizations are looking to get to. But of course, you know, as you move to this world, it brings a lot of challenges, I guess, as well, especially from the security side of things. So, you know, most customers these days are still quite familiar with this traditional security approach, but, you know, securing the perimeter, as you move out to the modern security side of things, you need to start changing the way you think about security. So, you know, how can you modernize security as you move from this on-premise world into cloud SaaS world or apps in the cloud? So changing from that sort of IT-centric, you know, creating those images, deploying them on-premise, you know, managing patches and all those kinds of things on-premise. How do we look at changing that as we move into this more cloud-focused world? And it's largely, I guess, you know, some of the core pieces that we see on the right-hand side there is identity and data-focused kind of security. How do we look at those things and ensure as we move to this new culture of work in the cloud, that our security doesn't get left behind and we're still stuck in that traditional security or, you know, classic security mode. So, you know, move to a more modern type of security to support those users. But you don't want it to be something that's too onerous on the user. So, you know, if you lock it down too much when you move to those cloud apps, users aren't going to want to, you know, sort of take on those new applications in the cloud. They will sort of look elsewhere if you don't have the right security measures in place and it becomes too difficult to work with. You know, that's when you start getting shadow IT creeping into your organization. So security is really important, but how do you make it sort of seamless, more seamless for the end users so that it's not prohibiting them too much in that collaboration and you know, sort of productivity experience that they're having. And of course, core to, I guess, all of those, you know, modern security offerings that is included in Microsoft 365 is something called the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph. This is that, you know, the centerpiece of their investment, and it's how Microsoft takes a vast amount of data from a huge variety of sources. So let's have a look at some of these numbers. I mean, 400 billion emails get analyzed by Outlook.com and Office 365 email services every month. That's huge. 5 billion threats detected on devices every month by Windows Defender. I mean, and that gives them a great deal of signal into what's happening on those endpoints and where are these attacks taking place, and also, you know, what do these attacks look like these days. So, you know, they also operate 200 plus global cloud, consumer and commercial services, everything from, you know, like we spoke about, Outlook.com, Xbox.live, Office 365 to Azure and so on. And with all of those services, they have a, you know, really a tremendous amount of surface area to defend. And because of this, I guess, you know, they're probably very well positioned in the to be able to sort of get that information or understand what those sort of attacks are looking like. You know, more than 1 billion Azure user accounts gives them some great insight into how, you know, people authenticate to Azure. And I guess that combined with the 450 billion monthly authentications in Azure AD and Microsoft accounts really gives them some good insight into, you know, what is normal behavior when it comes to sign-ins and authentication, and what is abnormal behavior, and how often it is that, you know, someone has the right password, but, you know, perhaps they're not the person that they say they are. We learn a lot about defending, you know, that really important control point identity. So, you know, by looking across that in the whole of the data set. So, you know, I guess the last piece here just to have a look at is, you know, the Bing piece. You know, they also have that service called Bing, and it sort of scans out across 18 billion web pages every month. And that also gives them a lot of sort of insight into that, and they can use that technology to protect against attacks like phishing campaigns and etc. So lots of, you know, insights, I guess, into that world, and I guess it kind of gives them that unique ability in the market to leverage those insights in the security offerings that they have. You know, and so why do they call it a graph? I guess the graph, because what's really important is connecting these pieces of intelligence, so that those signals are not just individual points of information. The graph can bring them together as something to draw patterns across. It can then learn from one point of data to influence how to interpret another point of data. So, it's really something they invest in heavily in, and gives them that unique position in the industry. And how does this sort of, that security graph relate to the Microsoft stack or the Microsoft 365 stack of security products? This is kind of defined in, those 4 areas that you can see on the screen. And as mentioned, all of these sort of areas are able to leverage a Microsoft security graph to then, take those insights and act on them. So some of those investments, identity and access management, and we'll go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. Of course, we can't cover all of them in great detail, but if you want to know more about each one of these pillars, we can schedule something at a later date, and we'll talk a little bit about what we can offer you towards the end of the session as well. So let's go into identity and access management. First up, let's have a look at this. So what's the approach here? I guess number one, is protect the front door. Make sure that we have the best authentication that we can. Make sure that there's no more than just passwords, and that we all work to that future of a password list or no passwords type of experience using things like Windows Hello or those 502 sticks. But how do we make sure that only authorized users are gaining access to that app or content, and we are keeping we're keeping those bad guys out of your organization? And I guess number two is improve the user experience, while maintaining that security. And I touched a little bit on that earlier. How can we get to that no passwords world, but also make that experience better for the users? So it's not too complicated or difficult for users when we improve that security. And then number three, you want to safeguard those credentials. When they are used as part of an OS session, for example, an application session, identities are constantly at risk, and we can look at identity protection to help out here. So those security operations experiences can identify those attacks and behavior anomalous activities in the on-premise world or in the cloud as well. So how does this, sort of concept of conditional access work? I'm not sure if anybody's familiar. You may have started looking at conditional access and probably coupled that with something like multi-factor authentication that's built into the service as well. But pretty much it looks at, when a user comes into the organization, it has a lot of those if statements on the left-hand side. So we can set up these policies to say, if a user, maybe it's a privileged user, or perhaps somebody has an unmanaged or managed device, or what location are they coming in from, and what app are they trying to access when they go into your organization. So we have a look at some of those if statements. It then looks at obviously the Microsoft security graph and takes all that data as well, so it pulls that into the equation, and then it's able to determine a risk factor. So is it this user that's trying to get access to my environment a high, medium, or low risk user? And then as an IT person in the organization, what I want to happen when that user, for example, wants to get access to one of those applications or to a service within my organization. So if it finds out that this user is on an unmanaged device coming in from a location that's unknown or not part of the corporate network, you obviously probably don't want to allow access straight away, but perhaps you want to require multi-factor authentication to happen before this user can gain access to any content or data in your organization. And so to be able to have that sort of flexibility where you can define these policies and have them automatically determine a risk and then enforce on the right-hand side one of those then statements is quite a powerful thing. So certainly conditional access with 2FA is something that I think as you move into this world of if you're starting to look at Office 365, is something that you should probably get started with as a first piece. So rather than migrate to Office 365 and then look at implementing some of this at a later stage, do it at the beginning, so that as your users start to understand how it works, if they get prompted for a two-factor authentication from the beginning, they'll get used to that approach, rather than putting in Office 365 and then trying to afterwards apply these policies where now users are having to go through a whole nother change management process before they can sort of get back to how they used to do things again. So putting that security in afterwards. So rather start with this as a first point of call, at least is my suggestion. And then moving on to the information protection world, right? So obviously, I don't know how many of you may have experience with Azure information protection, but over the last couple of months, really, Microsoft have put a lot of effort in unifying that labeling experience across Office 365, I guess with sensitivity labels, Windows, they had Windows information protection, and then in the Azure world, Azure information protection that could protect things and label content in all those services as well. But it was a little bit disjointed. But now they've kind of started to unify that labeling system across all those services, and with this, it makes things a lot easier on, I guess, IT as you start to look at information protection. But really, the approach is, you want to discover and classify that sensitive information, and this is really about understanding where is that sensitive information, and what of that is sensitive, and then, being able to apply labels to content that is highly classified, potentially, or confidential, maybe secrets, or not so classified, maybe public, general, or something to that effect. So these labels are customizable, so you can set them up, call them what you want, put your own policies behind them. So you may already have a policy in place for data classification, and you can match that to your existing classifications that you have. And then lastly, monitoring and remediating. So understanding where that information is going, who's accessing it, and how much control do you actually have over it. And of course, if you would need to track and trace it, or perhaps revoke the content at a later stage, you have the ability to do that as well. So some of the questions, I guess, when looking at implementing something like information protection in your organization is, have you defined what sensitive data actually means for your company? Do you have a way to detect sensitive data across your company? Do you have a way to ensure that these labels are persistent with the data wherever it travels? That's really important, because if something's labeled in your organization and you then send it outside, do those labels persist when they get there? So those policies or those labels still apply when you're sharing outside of your organization. So there's lots of things to consider when implementing a solution like this, but I guess the key part here is you can label something, apply a policy, and that policy or that protection is persistent with that content. So as it moves around different, potentially cloud services or on-premise file shares, the protection stays with that content. And you can leave your organization, somebody else might get their hands on it, but if they can't authenticate back to that service, they won't be able to get access to that data. So a really key piece here in terms of protecting your content and data. Let's have a look at a quick example. I guess you have a in this scenario here, we've got a user who works in finance for Contoso Finance in London, for example, and this user is creating some content, probably like they always do, and may not know some of the policies or governance policies that they have in place for content, and decides they want to share this data with somebody else. Could be a partner, somebody else externally to their organization, and something they may have done before. But in this instance, potentially there's some sensitive information in that content. So, as they upload it, and that could be into something like, potentially Dropbox, OneDrive, so any one of those sort of public cloud shares or public share services. The nice thing here is with information protection, as that user when they upload or create their content, you can have it automatically detect what contents is actually in that document. So it might have credit card information, for example, or passport number, and they might have a legitimate reason, so it might not be a malicious intent here, and they want to share it with somebody externally. But as they do that, it gets stamped or labeled with an internal label, and because it's picked up that it's got personal information potentially in this content, and as they try and share that then into one of those cloud service apps, Microsoft Cloud App Security will have a look at that and say, oh, this has got an internal label, this can't be shared externally. It will remove any sort of, or won't let it be shared with an external URL, for example, and then it'll move that into a quarantine sort of folder that only the owner of the file will then have access to, and will not give access to anybody externally. Can be admin can be notified, and also then you can go back to that user, I guess, who started this whole process and say, hey, by the way, this shouldn't be happening. But you'll get that that tip or the policy tip popping up in the content as well to give the user some more information about perhaps why they shouldn't be sending that data out externally into the big wide world. And then threat protection, I guess, probably one of the more key pieces that most people are sort of looking at, and that's threat protection is where you want to sort of prevent or make sure that you reduce that attack surface. So to reduce the number of places where an attacker might find some kind of access into the system or the network or the endpoint device, this sort of means filtering out any malicious code or links before they are ever used or reached. So for example, in email or other document sharing services. And also, that deep protection on endpoints that includes advanced hardware-based security to isolate critical assets from attacks. The second part here is, we want to detect attacks faster and make sure we can block those. And it can all be about prevention, so it can't all be about prevention. That's really important piece, I guess, but it also has to be about understanding that you will be breached at some point, and so that's sort of taking that assume breach stance, because if it hasn't happened before, it certainly could happen in the future. So if you take that stance where you might be breached at some stage, that you always sort of are in that position where you have the tools and capability to prevent that from happening, or detect it at least if there is a breach. So I guess that's point number 3, responding automatically to those breaches when appropriate, especially as we know that so many of these attackers who are trying to get into your organization are also using automated tools to get in. So really important piece there. And I guess, the approach across protection, detection, and response is to, build capabilities into these services in Microsoft 365 rather than bolt them on. Whether we're talking about a cloud service like Office 365, Azure, or the operating system like Windows, Microsoft are focused on providing that built-in protection and detection and response, and this is critical to quickly detecting attacks across the entire estate. So let's have a look at the various stages, I guess, of an attack, or that attack kill chain, as some may call it. This is a great example of how those different protection capabilities built into Microsoft 365 can protect you across the board. So obviously there's many different attack vectors that somebody could get into your organization. They can insert something onto a USB drive and they could get onto your device. I guess the most common one here is email. There's also obviously the ability for a user might be browsing a malicious website and something happens from that attack vector. But let's focus on, I guess, more of the email route. So because that, I guess, is where we've seen most of these attacks happen today. So Office 365, ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, we'll kind of look at this space, and it's kind of like an expert in not just email, but we'll also look at your other Office and Office 365 services and make sure that's protecting those as well. So the key part here is Office 365 ATP is not just a mail threat protection service. If you have URL that's in a Word document, for example, and you're trying to share that out through OneDrive for business, advanced threat protection for 365 will also, make sure that you're covered from that perspective. So it looks at, the entire office workloads, including your mailboxes. So if a threat is reached the endpoint because it didn't come from email, for example, then Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection will come into that. So, but obviously it also monitors activities such as installations, communications with that, command and control escalation points. So this is kind of where, as we spoke about, ATP across the board will help you out. So email comes in, ATP's got you covered from the attack vector. If it comes down to the endpoint, then Windows Defender ATP will be there to cover you, and that can also then communicate back to 365 ATP. So in the event that something does manage to slip through from email and Windows Defender ATP picks it up, they will then, through that security graph, be able to talk back to Office 365 ATP, and then make sure that it's blocking any potential further emails from getting through to your organization that may have a malware in it or a malicious URL embedded. Then of course, as the user gets in, they kind of start moving across your organization, and then the attacker at some stage might be able to get access to some sort of sensitive data or information, and then they're able to exfiltrate that out. And I guess, the key point here is first look at trying to stop it before it gets into your organization. If it does get into your organization, then we have endpoint protection, that sort of ER approach where endpoint detection and protection can sort of pick that up. And then we have the tools that can give you visibility to see, across the board what's happening across all the threat protection capabilities through the Microsoft Security Center. So really is a nice example of how all of these sort of capabilities can work together to protect your environment. So the last piece to talk about in the security stack here is security management. And I guess this is the kind of piece where, if you're an InfoSec guy, information security or security ops guy, is being able to get that visibility into what's happening from a security perspective in your organization. So visibility is obviously a key piece, but also to be able to have the control that you need, and then if something is happening, to give you some guidance on what to do next. So if you are something does happen in your organization, or you have a breach, what can you do to sort of remediate and have the ability to get those suggestions and guidance from those tools as well. And of course, once again, across devices, apps, data, and in your infrastructure. And I guess things have really come a long way since Microsoft's a couple of years ago first started looking at these kinds of new security tools. There was lots of different dashboards that you had to go to get these pieces of information that you can see on the screen now. So they've worked really hard to give you that holistic view across Windows Defender ATP, Office 365 ATP, and Azure ATP, and kind of give you that information into a single dashboard. So as an InfoSec guy or security ops guy, I can come into my Microsoft 365 security dashboard, get a quick view on what's going on, have a look if there's anything that I really need to take care of straight away, or there's something that's sticking out that I need to take action on right away. And it's all available for me right here in this new Microsoft security dashboard. Something that you'll see in the left-hand corner there is Secure Score. And now, I guess it's kind of started in the Office 365 world, but it's kind of creeping its way into the rest of the apps in the Microsoft 365 world, and they're trying to unify that score. But if you're sort of new to these security tools in Microsoft, and you started adopting some of the technology, and you have an Office 365 environment, have a look at Secure Score. It's a great tool that will sort of look at your environment and then give you suggestions on how you can make your environment I guess harden a little bit more. So it'll suggest things like, okay, you haven't got multi-factor authentication turned on for your administrators. Straight away, that's something you should do, and it'll give you the steps on how to go about setting up multi-factor authentication for your administrators. And then, we can move on, and it'll give you more and more sort of, I guess, tips on how to make sure you can improve your security posture within the Microsoft 365 world. So sort of in summary, you can see the slide here. We spoke about quite a few things today, and certainly there's a lot more that we can talk about across the stack. And each one of these topics we could spend an hour on. But so if you want to know a little bit more, or you want to talk a bit more about any one of these things, please do reach out, and we can have a deeper sort of workshop. So obviously, just to sum it up again, we spoke about identity and access management tools. And those enable you to take an identity-based approach to security and establish truly conditional access policies. Information protection solutions, that helps you apply protection that's going to travel around that document and make sure that it's persistent, whether it's inside or outside your organization. Threat protection capabilities that are built into that platform, so that you can strengthen both the pre-breach protection with these capabilities across email and collaboration services and endpoints, including some of those hardware-based protection and post-breach detection components as well. So, and then lastly, obviously, that security management and the tools that are available to give you more visibility into what's going on in your organization. I guess now, kind of, one of the big pieces is how do you sort of take advantage of some of these solutions. I guess typically you might already have invested in Microsoft 365 E3, and you've started looking at some of these components in the E3 stack, potentially things like, you've looked at setting up conditional access, you've turned on 2FA, you're looking at Intune, but you really want to start now implementing some of those more advanced security pieces. And when we look at the E5, sort of portfolio of products, it's really more around the automation capabilities, and I guess those AI capabilities that's built into some of the services in the E5. So E3 might be a little bit more manual. If I want to classify content, the user actually has to go in and hit the button to classify it as confidential or secrets. But where I'm moving to the E5 world, we can make that an automated process. But I guess, you've got to start somewhere. So, you might have started in the E3 world and you want to look at adopting some of those E5 capabilities. But you really, you're not too interested in perhaps some of the other capabilities in the E5 stack. So, your core strategy now is to make sure security is key, and you only want those pieces in the E5. And so it's quite expensive then if you want to go, Microsoft 365 E3 all the way to Microsoft 365 E5 when you're only looking at, the security components in E5. And if you want to, then take each one of those individually and then license it that way, it can be quite expensive as well, because as you start to bundle these things together, Microsoft puts a better discount in place for those. So with this in mind, Microsoft also trying to look at, okay, well, let's then break it out into these different areas, security, compliance, meetings and callings, and analytics. And how can we then, maybe change the way we look at things and relate that back to some of their customers? So, we've, I guess, in today's session spoke more around security and compliance, and this is where Microsoft recently announced 2 new SKUs to add on to your Microsoft 365 E3 platform, which is really nice. So, if your strategy is more towards security, you can start with the security bit, so add the security add-on, and then at a later stage, maybe you want to look at the compliance pieces. But I guess, and if you're taking security and compliance, you're not going to be too far from going to that E5 full step up. So, certainly if you only need one of those, then it's going to make a lot more sense to do that rather than step up the entire to the entire E5 suite. So what's kind of happened and how they put these together? So if you look at, in the security pillar, let's have a look at that first. There's been a couple of changes, and so look carefully around the Office 365 Threat Intelligence, ATP, and Cloud App Security piece, because the slide kind of builds out. And I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with Threat Intelligence. We didn't speak too much about that, but that kind of gives you some great insight and tools, like a text simulator where you can create your own campaigns. So for example, a phishing campaign, you want to send it out to your entire organization and see you can catch, clicking on those links, and then use that as a tool to then, do some learning and inside your organization around, why is it a bad thing to click on an email, although it might look legitimate. So that's a great way to understand it better, and which users in your organization might be prone to, when they get those emails, click on those links and get their credentials taken out. So let's have a look at then that piece over there, threat intelligence and ATP. And so moving forward, you'll see that Office 365 ATP is kind of being incorporated into threat intelligence. So you see it moved into threat intelligence. Let me show you that again. And then they're renaming that to Office 365 ATP Plan 2. So in ATP Plan 2, you're going to have threat intelligence combined with Office 365 ATP. They're getting rid of, I don't know if you saw that happen, Office 365 Cloud App Security is falling away. And that's really because you'll see in EM+S E5, there's Microsoft Cloud App Security. And that's kind of, makes the Office 365 Cloud App Security piece a little bit redundant, because Microsoft Cloud App Security has everything that Office 365 Cloud App Security has and some more. So that's why they, that's a piece that's a little bit redundant there, and they're taking it out. And then they've created this new security SKU for Microsoft 365, so you can add on just those security components with a single subscription to give you all of those capabilities. And if you look at the compliance piece, not really too much change there, just that they sort of bundling those compliance offerings, advanced compliance and Azure Information Protection Plan to the automatic capabilities and the cool AIP scanning tool that can classify, label, and protect content automatically and manually together. So you'll see there, those kind of get bundled together, and they've created a new offering if you just want to take on the compliance pieces in the Microsoft 365 world. Another thing you might have noticed, and that's all the way to the right-hand side, and the analytics pillar, just while we're here, is My Analytics. I don't know if anyone ever used My Analytics, but it was an Office 365 E5, or you could buy standalone. So that's kind of been taken out now and is available to any customers who has a suite of products with Microsoft 365, Office 365 that includes Exchange Online Plan. You'll get My Analytics now as part of that suite. So if you have E1, you have E3, you'll get My Analytics now as part of that. And you might have, if you're already using these components, you might see it's already in your tenants. So you can start leveraging My Analytics straight away. So what does this really mean? As I kind of alluded to earlier, if your main strategy right now is to go down that security front and you want to adopt some of those security technologies that Microsoft has in the E5 suites, but you don't want to invest in the full E5 security stack, or E5 stack in terms of across the board. Now they've come out with this offering, so they can give you all the security bits and pieces, but at a nice sort of more discounted rate. So typically, if we look at buying all those individual components onto Microsoft 365 E3, or if you buy the bundle, you're going to have around about 36% saving if you buy that new bundle rather than individually purchase each one of those plans to the left hand side. Why is the discount a little bit less on the right hand side for compliance? Because there's less products on the right hand side, so you only bundling two, whereas in the security stack there's a whole bunch more, and the more offerings that are bundled together, the bigger the discount Microsoft's obviously able to give you when you're looking at buying one of these new offerings. So how can you, I guess, take on these new offerings from Microsoft? First port of call here is you need to have Microsoft 365 E3. So these new offerings are really for the existing customers in Office 365 or Microsoft 365 E3 specifically. And now, you're looking at the security pieces. You don't want to go all the way to Microsoft 365 E5. You just want to get, that identity and threat protection pieces, or the compliance pieces, information protection and compliance, and you can take those on as add-ons from E3. So you'll have the E3, you'll buy the identity and threat protection add-on or the information protection and compliance add-on to give you the, either one of those capabilities that you're looking to get. And of course, you may have today Microsoft 365 E3 with maybe Windows E5, for example, and there could be some overlap then if you take the identity and threat protection one, but then they have also a way that you can, sort of take that on with other add-ons to get you to the same sort of state without, charging you double, I guess. I guess key thing here is this is, just a quick overview on how it's licensed. If you have some more complex requirements or you want to go into more detail, we're certainly around to have a conversation in more detail around, how we can help you get to that state, whether you're using the new offerings available or, you just want some more advice on, I just want to look at one of those components. I just want the information protection. I don't want the compliance pieces. And we can help you understand how to get there as well. So that's how that's done. So quickly, just in summary, once more, what is changing? There's a new 365 E5 security offerings being introduced, and those are add-ons for the Microsoft 365 E3 users. The compliance one, new offering there, so incorporating advanced compliance and Azure information protection. And Office 365 ATP plan, that's a new one that's included threat intelligence and Office 365 ATP in a single SKU, and actually bringing down the cost on that. So if you had a look at threat intelligence, it was quite an expensive one to buy. So now if you look at, if you had to put threat intelligence and ATP together, it would be a little bit costly, but so Microsoft have bundled them together and brought that price down as well. So that's great to hear. Cloud App Security, Office 365 Cloud App Security, as I said, that becomes redundant because it's included in Microsoft CASB or Cloud App Security, and you get it all the functionality that you need in that tool. So a little bit of change there. And then My Analytics then available for all Office 365 suites and 365 Microsoft suites. Really cool tool this. So if you haven't checked it out and you do have an E3 or E1 suite, go and have a look at My Analytics. And what's staying the same? So nothing really changes in, if you have Microsoft 365 E5, all those features and functionality are still there. Office 365 E5, they continue to get that Office 365 Cloud App Security value. So nothing changes if you are an E5 Office 365 user. No change in audio conferencing and phone system. Power BI, no change. And then pricing, all these updates to the SKUs will not result in any price increase, which is a good thing. And those new security and compliance offers deliver a discount over purchasing them standalone. So that's great. I think that's pretty much, everything that we have time to cover in today's session. But as mentioned, there's a number of things we can sort of look at moving forward. If you're want to have a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 discovery workshop with us, you want to have a little bit more in detailed security alignment workshop. And those first two on the left are free of charge, of course, if you see that in the orange block. Or if you want a more lengthy engagement or penetration testing and assurance services, there's that one on the far right. We'll share this information with you. If you have any questions, please do reach out to your Bytes account team. They can assist you and help you out a bit more on this. I'm just going to quickly hand over back to Cassie. Thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to hearing from you at a later stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. I hope everyone found that really useful. I'm just going to have a quick look just to see if we have any questions. Let me have a look. Okay, sorry, I couldn't get the questions box up. So we do have a couple of questions really more around licensing, but those really are sort of a bit more complex. So what we'll do is we will speak to the licensing experts here at Bytes, and then we'll come back to you directly if that's okay. If there was anything else regarding security features, any more detail that you need that you feel wasn't covered, pop a question in there now, or email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk. We can come back to you. You can alternatively obviously reach out to your Bytes account manager. They'll be more than happy to have a conversation with you further. Again, there is a feedback form at the end, so when it pops up, if you could just fill that in, we really appreciate it. And you can let us know if you're interested in any of the workshops today, and we can send you further information. The slides will be sent out as well as a PDF version along with the recording, so I'll do that for you in the next day or so. I think that's everything for today. Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you everybody for joining us.